Hi, everybody. Welcome to Find the Helpers. I am your host, Brad Bogus,
And I'm Christian Campbell.
and we are here to talk all things fighting fascism. Really, Find the Helpers is a show about finding people out there, regular people who are fighting against authoritarian rule and all the different ways that they're doing it. So, hopefully, we can highlight ways that you can also do it yourselves, as well as us. This is a journey with Christian and I on learning how we can be active and engaged and make an impact in such scary times.
We've got the National Guard in DC. We've got the threat of National Guard going into other cities. And I think the conversation that I'm really interested in is that I've been I'm late to protest. I started protesting during Black Lives Matter. And
Yeah.
it's always been kind of an experience for me that I often wonder for other people, and maybe that holds them back from participating. And so I'm kind of always been interested in talking to you guys about what your mental process is when you're preparing to join a protest, how you choose the protests, what to expect, maybe what even like your first experience was. What was that like to go to your first protest? How did you find your people? How did you overcome any anxiety you might have had with it? Or maybe what was it that drove you to show up? And then why do you keep protesting today? And sort of walk us through that because you guys are really active. You're on the ground, and this is also like we're going to talk to our producer Vince during this because he's going to be going to DC, I think, in the next 24 hours, 48 hours.
Yeah,
I'm not
I think
sure.
later
And I
today.
kind of, yeah, like so the what, the why, the when, the how of what's going on there. Clearly, we've got some thoughts on this show of force that Trump and his ilk are trying to make right now. And how do we combat that in such a way that we're not also making enemies also of those who are serving in uniform who may also want to are thinking also that they don't really like what they're standing for. And I want
Yeah.
to kind of like these are questions that have been rolling around in my head as sort of a newbie to this. And I know that a lot of listeners are noobs as well. So yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to be tackling these questions and more with our guest today, producer Vince. Vince is an award-winning journalist, big J journalist, and lately has been producing These American Crossroads, which is a fascinating series. I highly urge you to check out, read, and share and follow because rather than doing what the mainstream media is doing, which is broadly reporting on all of the major hubs of cities and policies. Vince is actually going out into the heartland all across the Midwest, crisscrossing across from Iowa to Idaho to Nebraska to Kansas to Missouri to even eastern Colorado, all the way out to Denver's kind of like the border of what is considered the heartlands, and now is going to be extending his reach out to DC in the coming week. So follow this American Crossroads or these American Crossroads because the stories he's telling are so compelling, and I think you need to hear more from the activists on the ground in red states.
Hey, it is so it's good to be back on the show with you guys for sure. Hi.
So let's talk a little bit about the protest movements that happened over Labor Day. I was at a protest in Denver. Vince, I know you went up to Greeley, north of Denver. Kind of see like for people who don't know, Greeley is like the cow town of the Denver metro. Is that a bad characterization of Greeley?
Yeah, that's a bad characterization of
Shit.
Greeley.
Sorry, folks in
Denver,
Greeley. I love you.
Denver is a cow town. We're all cow towns. Like we're founded because like so the connotation certainly not appreciated. How I characterized Greeley in the story that I wrote about the protest yesterday is that they are the metropolis inside of rural northeast Colorado, outside of the Front Range cities. The closest Front Range city to them is, I mean, technically Loveland, but it's Loveland a city. Fort Collins is an hour west of
Yep.
Greeley, and Greeley's really the last like major town. It has 100,000 people in it now. And that's only
Wow.
as
Okay.
recent as 2020, and they're going to get up to 120,000 by 2026. So both the University of Northern Colorado, the history of it's 48% Latino. So the
Man.
history of Latino working class up there, the unionization up there, like they're Cowtown, sure, but like there's just a connotation to that
Yeah,
they are.
well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like white, rural, southern, cowboy racist is what you usually think of when you hear Cowtown. But like, I think the Denver sort of white metro judgment of Greeley has very much colored how I think of Greeley because I've never been really.
Yeah, and I mean, like a lot of the mischaracterization of Greeley, Colorado, is definitely like a holdover implicit racism, because it
Yeah.
is such a Latino working class area, and that it is surrounded by white cowboys in Weld County, who perpetuate that because they don't like. I mean, there's a contentious relationship between the populations up there right now, but. But yeah, there's like if you ever have the opportunity to go spend some time in up there, it's fabulous. I mean, it's a lot like Laramie, Wyoming, another like cowboy university town where there's really
Yeah.
great people, there's progressive politics, there's cowboy socialists, which are honestly one of my favorite classes of people out there.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
and so that's one of the things that like I've really enjoyed about doing these American Crossroads series is that it's putting me in a lot of red towns, red cities, red states, and really like challenging my own preconceived like misconceptions about them based on like how people talked about those places around me rather than going to see them
Yeah.
for myself. And so, yeah, definitely go like if you have the opportunity to take a trip to a Greeley, or I'll find the Canadian equivalent of it. I'm sure there's plenty for you, Christian. But
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
definitely go spend some time and hang out because it might surprise you how similar it is to Denver, just
Yeah.
much smaller.
I love that. I love learning that about places that I realize have like where my understanding of them has been tainted by white supremacy, right? Like even growing up in Texas, like I had certain thoughts about Houston, because of all the mega churches, and like it always felt to me like very racist and white supremacist, but it's the most diverse city in the nation. And like at a certain point, I had to contend with my own judgment of where I came
Hmm.
from because even the town I grew up in, which had a race riot at my high school in 1994, by the way, right? Like it wasn't like I was being unfair necessarily, but it was a very diverse town. It's just that the black and brown communities were entirely suppressed over decades and were still actively being suppressed while I was growing up. And I wasn't aware of the system until, a little bit later. So it's really cool to challenge our assumptions and learn the reality of places when our first instinct is to call a place like Greeley just a cow town. You know what I mean? Like that's like such a diminutive way to talk about a very diverse population that I was unaware of. So
It's got a great
love it.
university in it too. That's where University of Northern Colorado is at, and it's a really great school.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I had that
So
experience last in terms of judgment. Just to kick back on this,
yeah,
last year I was producing a musical in LA, Reefer Madness, and it's a satire. It's very political, and I've been associated with this show for 25 years. First an actor, and then I had put on the producer hat, and we put together a great show, award winning, all that stuff. But we got a lot of people getting on planes from all over the United States to come see the show, and they were coming from all the places, all the random spaces to come and see this show because of what it meant to them and because of those communities that you like, those little dots of people who are fighting the good fight. And the biggest surprise I had was a woman who came up to me after the show saying that she loved the show. She was just over the moon with it. And she said, "I'm from Salt Lake City. If you bring this show to Salt Lake City, you're going to blow up. It's going to." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Well, the thing is that when you live in such a repressed state, there is a really solid the underground of Salt Lake City, the opposing forces to the clearly Christian nationalist patriarchal kind of feel that you know it is she said that core group of sort of those who are against Mormonism, got out of Mormonism, saw what Mormonism and religious sort of dictatorship looks like and can
yeah,
look like. She said they are primed and ready, and they're very powerful in Salt Lake City, and as a sort of a movement.
yeah.
So that was a big sort of opener too. Is like where do we want to take our culture as well? Don't make assumptions about where to put the culture. Put it where you don't think it should be actually, because that's where it's most needed. You know?
Battled the most cages. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
I
absolutely.
I absolutely love that. And I think that's a good segue into discussing the protest yesterday because Vince was in a place that I already had a mischaracterization of, preconceived notion of. And it was kind of, a much bigger tent than one might expect. Denver in and of itself also for this protest was a bit of a big tent protest, right? Like the protests were a Labor Day protest organized nationally by union organizers and 5051. But the the purpose of that protest, the things that were being chanted, the signs that were being carried, the contingencies of people that showed up was everything from freeing Palestine to ending the occupation, anti-ICE, anti-Trump, definitely pro-union, pro-worker. But that, even the protest organizers weren't just chanting about labor rights or worker rights or necessarily the divide of wealth between the billionaire class and the workers. And it was a really interesting thing just to keep witnessing. Like this is sort of like the vibe of all the protests I have seen so far in this quote unquote protest season, if you will. And I know, Vince, you've seen a lot more of these, particularly as you've been crisscrossing the Heartland. So love to know kind of what you saw out in Greeley, some of the messages that you think really took center stage, what you think had the most impact with what went down there. I've got some thoughts about Denver, but I want to hear from you first.
I mean, it was nice to see Greeley's, it's a union town, at the meatpacking factory just last year in 2024. The union helped stand up against human trafficking allegations and super abusive work conditions for primarily Haitian immigrants at their Northern Colorado plant. And so outside of other 5051 protests where I've seen them be more about the message of the day, the no kings or the rage against the regime, or in this case, the workers over billionaires. Like workers over billionaires was deliberately picked because it coincides with the labor movement and the recognition of Labor Day. They weren't going to co-opt a day of worker solidarity, which I appreciate. And so in Union
Yeah.
Strong, really, it was led by a lot of union workers, but they and organizers, but they presented a different variety. It wasn't blue collar labor, traditional blue collar industry like factory labor, like I've seen in the past or I've seen in other places. It was teacher unions, it was the letter carrier union. It
Yeah.
was yeah, it was. I mean, white collar or service and like teachers are definitely a service industry. Um, but like that classification of the union leaders were there and they were really and they were leading the conversations for the day. And everything was then piled from union labor organizing into electoral politics. Greeley is the northeast population center for Colorado's Congressional District 8, which is currently represented by Gabe Evans
Gabe
in Congress.
Evans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Across the country right now, it's thought of as like the most flippable seat. And Governor Polis isn't taking the lead from Missouri, Texas, California. He's refusing to redistrict Colorado, which with a 4-4 congressional representation and an independent commission to put together these districts, they were fairly built, and it's in our Constitution to do it that way. So like it's kind of wild to see that this highly competitive race could be the one of the two or three that decides the House of Representatives. And so around that, the union was pushing everybody into electoral politics, and it was union organizer, the Starbucks union organizer, the one yeah, the woman who won the first unionized Starbucks location with her colleagues in
Oh,
here in
right.
Colorado. She spoke. She was one of the union organizers. So like it went between union
Cool.
to candidate to union to candidate to union to candidate from seats for city council all the way up to that congressional race. And Colorado does that at a lot. Like electeds and candidates get to speak at a lot of these political movements, but across the
Yeah.
heartland, that is definitely not the norm. And when I was going into Greeley yesterday morning and I was trying to decide like what to expect and what I anticipated seeing, I thought that maybe there would be a candidate speaking as a union leader because there is one of the congressional candidates is she was the president of the teachers union. And I was like that would make sense. But I didn't. I expected it to be more like red state heartland than Denver, where you do see that electoral politics in everything. But that definitely stood out to me. Were there
Yeah.
candidates in Denver yesterday? Would you see at your big tent?
Yeah, I don't believe so. When I showed up, there were some speeches going on. I wasn't around those speeches, so they may have had an elected speak. They definitely weren't present or prominent or taking part in the marches, which leads me to believe that maybe they weren't really centered. But I can't really say that I like saw it being about, local politics or local electors. It's very likely that that could have been in the programming, and I just missed it because I was this interesting dynamic is I haven't seen this before. Maybe this is not new and it's just new to me, but so far all the protests I've gone to in Denver have been like activist fairs and protests. There's like this hub where they set up booths and different organizations set up to like get people to join. This one had a lot of like merch vendors. There's a lot of merch vendors that show up at these protests. I'm just like, bro, what is going on right now? Like, feels very weird to me to be selling shirts when I have no idea who the person is selling them or if they're going to an organization or not. And they're all these different protest merch shirts. And I just like, I wonder if these vendors also show up to the MAGA protests with like the MAGA
Yeah,
shirts.
bro, the revolution will be profitable.
That's right.
It might not be
That's
televised,
right.
but
Yeah. But anyway, I was kind of like working my way around the village a little bit until the march started, and then I joined the marches. And there was two marches that came out of that movement downtown. And we had maybe, I don't know, like I think total in downtown, I would say at most maybe 1250, like a little over 1,000 people, about 1,000 people on the first march, maybe 150 on the second march, which is, just eyeball judging. I think maybe like 750 people turned out for the Rage Against the Regime protest. So this was definitely like more turnout, probably because of the day off. It wasn't competing with like a major city event like the last day of the UMS, which was a big Denver pull during the Rage Against the Regime thing. Might have been why we had such smaller numbers, but it was a decent turnout, and it didn't feel really electeds forward. It was a big tent in other ways, like there was no it didn't feel like there was like super consolidated messaging or purpose behind the way it was organized. It was just sort of like everyone's mad about a lot of stuff. Let's all take the streets and be mad about it.
Which seems to be the ongoing critique of progressive organizations and the left, for that matter, is that there's just so many messages. They're all connected, but they're not a unifying message. And people need to have that unifying message. I mean, maybe the merch is the unifying message,
It's the merch
right?
table.
But yeah, the merch table. Yeah, well, I walked away with a shirt. I guess that's what it was about. But there was a sense of despair. And Vince, you were saying as you were going through, and Brad, you were saying this as well. And the organizers there was a sense of despair when things first started with Trump because it felt like such a gut punch and people didn't know what to do. And this is even the people who did already had been fighting the fight. And now they thought, well, that's it. All of our techniques are out the window. It didn't work. He got reelected and now we're into this hell.
Yeah.
Maybe we've got it all wrong. And what is the feeling now today? Is there some difference in that? Are there new techniques coming out in terms of how to handle this? Are there new leadership that's rising up? I mean, or is there a false hope going on, or is there a real hope? And what's the feel?
people who have been doing this for a very long time, and were pretty much the people who were already organizing on at the end of January and making sure that people knew what to do next. They're feeling very tired, feeling very fatigued, but they still have, I wouldn't call it a revolutionary hope, but a belief in the system sustaining. And so they're organizing around electoral politics. They're recognizing that there's very likely going to be a lot of voter intimidation tactics. The president is already coming at mail-in ballots across so many states. And then the idea of ICE agents being stationed at polling locations is pretty terrifying as well. But they believe that they're going to be able to vote their way to a better future. And inside of that, there's an interesting divide between the liberals who are lionizing people like Gavin Newsom right now, and deciding
Yeah.
that 2028, with 2026 so much sooner, is the election that they're focusing on. I do see some of that like delirious optimism in them. Like it's hard to take that seriously because it's like, how
Hmm.
are you going to be able to sustain this person for 3 years, and also how are you choosing your person that at this point already, just because they're winning a social media fight? Like, we
Right.
need to catch our breath. We need to handle the house that's on fire before we start building a new one. And we need to recognize that some of the house is going to burn. And so, with that, there's a lot of people who are feeling the anticipation and the readiness. The National Guard deployments have definitely gotten like like people do not like that. There's some loud voices on the internet, and I've met one or two people in person who do legitimately think that they're being deployed only to dangerous places and to dangerous spots. But after that, was it eight state compact, eight red state compact to deploy the Guard internally? Like I was in Nebraska when that order came down, and Nebraskans were like, "Oh, ho, ho, wait, what?" Like
Hmm.
the ones who were excited to see Chicago under Guard occupation were like,
That's
"Wait,
right.
it's actually going to happen here first?" And I'm like, "It's going to happen kind of all at once everywhere." And that's been like a unifying thing that has a lot of people like, we need to do something now. Which is like we people have been sounding alarms for a long time, and when is too late? It's never really too late, but it's good to see that like the Guard deployments, like ICE created an like a people did not like the disappearances. People did not like the loss of due process. And then the Epstein files served as a suitable distraction to forget about ICE. But the
Yep.
Guard deployments have a lot of that same energy to it. And it's a lot of the same people who even voted for who were Trump voters, or were first time Trump voters. They are not here for the occupations, and so
Yeah.
it's interesting to see how people talk about that.
Yeah, that's
Mm,
good to hear. That's what gives me a little
yeah.
bit of hope, because I think like as I consider what gives me the most anxiety right now, living in Denver feels safe. It has felt safe for some time, even though, we've got our share of fucking problems and plenty of police brutality and like, a relatively hostile governor. Not necessarily a Greg Abbott, but he's not great. And yet, Colorado feels like there are some protections in place that insulate us from the rest of the country until National Guard deployments happen in LA. And then you hear the rhetoric and you hear the plan, and he's going to deploy them to all of the blue state major cities, and then really all of the major cities in every state is really what he's thinking. Now I know that the Guard's going to be in Denver. I know that when we go out to our next protest in Denver, there may be a bunch of military, people rolling around on MRAPs. Like that's going to be what we are protesting against. That's going to be the quote unquote police force that will be lining up in front of our front ranks, right? So like that gives me a lot of anxiety. I want to start believing in things like, that the service people will, choose not to participate, will find ways to dissent, but, you know, that's hopium right this moment. In the meantime, it's like we need to know how we are going to stand up, organize, be a part of fighting against that. Because if that really does draw a lot of people out, if people really do dislike those deployments as much as they say, we're going to have a lot new people coming out into the streets.
Mhm.
A lot of folks voicing their opposition in a way they maybe have never done before. Um, and they'll be afraid and they won't know exactly what to do. So I'm hoping that, with your trip to DC events, and with our ability to talk with, a few more of the organizers in the near future from, say, LA, we can start to provide a little bit more of a playbook to people about like, here's how to prepare for a National Guard deployment. Here's how to protest in this environment, right? Here's how to make community. Christian, I know you and I were talking earlier about like, and you mentioned at the start of the show, how do you even make friends and community, at these protests, right? And I think that's something we probably should tackle.
Yeah, where do you find your allies? I mean, going back to this the lack of unifying message, Trump could be creating the unifying message that we're talking about. I mean, if this is it, we're just up against military occupation of our cities. That's a good place to start. And if we all meet there, and maybe even some people who maybe voted for Trump want to meet us there, maybe we can talk about some other issues while we're there. But we definitely don't like military in our cities as a threat of potential coup, because that's what it feels like, right? Is a
Yeah.
way of saying, listen, we could just put the military in your city and we could do a military coup if we wanted, during an election, let's say, and create a little bit of some sort of event. So I think there's a lot of folks that might start coming out to these protests for that. So I guess the one thing I've been thinking about though is how to interact with the military during these protests. Are we against the military or are we against the use of the military? And I think it's really good to define that when going in. And I don't know, I'd be curious what you discover, Vince, because what I'm seeing online from veterans who are doing a really good job of protesting sort of the occupation, let's call it that, the military occupation of DC. And this, you know, the military being used for political theater. To be against the soldiers, they are doing their job for now. I think it's important not to force them to escalate a situation, but give them a way of, backing down, like a golden bridge off. I think we're going to have to talk about these kinds of things. And then I'm just curious about sort of like what is the protest approach to this when they go on out. For the military at this point, I'm seeing a lot of military people who are posting, well, I'm against what we're doing and I'm leaving the military. And for them, I'm saying, if you want to leave the military because of what's going on, you're the exact person who needs to stay in the military, because you see what's going on. And if orders are going to be given at any point, there need to be people like you who are going to look to your fellow buddies and go, yeah, we're not doing that. So how do we not make enemies of the military as we do this protest? What's your approach on this, Vincent?
I don't really have an approach as because I'm covering this as a journalist, and so I am seeing lots of different approaches that are being utilized. I'm excited to be going out to DC with a group from Kansas. That includes veterans, that includes people who have family members, children who are doing active duty right now, including in the National Guard, and so being able to view how they interact, and there are conversations in their meetings and in their organizing meetings right now about how they want to and what the mood is. There's definitely an agreed with this particular group that they're against this use of the military, but not the military as a whole. Again, it includes proud veterans and family members of active duty service members. And so seeing how they are approaching it, they are talking about offering golden parachutes and ways out and being able to help members who want to leave be able to do so honorably and legally and quickly. There are also, I mean, there are obviously inside of every leftist movement, there's going to be questions about the necessity of a standing military inside of an imperialist nation, and whether or not, like, our swollen defense, I guess, Department of War budget is and gets and facilitates programs like ICE and like so there are conversations about the military industrial complex for sure, but I don't think that this is the place to have that. I think that reminding these guard troops that they serve a constitution, not necessarily a president, is a reasonable thing to do right now, offering them a way out. But also, like, I definitely understand the thought point of that. Like, maybe it would make sense for them to stay in as long as they can, recognizing that these people are going to be experiencing harm to be in order to do that. And so we do need to remember the humanity inside of the soldiers. And if they can't be there, by all means, get out as while you still can and while you still have your mental facilities as intact as possible. Because even the 3.5% population nonviolent theory that is finally starting to make the rounds inside of liberal circles. People on the left and people on the right have known about it. I mean, there's a 3% militia that's a far right
Mhm.
militia, but
Can
now
you
that it's
explain that
finally
concept a little further? Because I don't think I'm following.
it's the idea that it only takes 3.5% of a nation's population to successfully pull off a non-violent revolution.
Hmm.
This is a theory that's been pushed, and then the 3% militia is a far-right militia that interprets that as using violent force. This because it's a very thick book and they only read the introduction. When you read the rest of it, you find out that
Yeah.
violent revolution tend to not uphold without a nonviolent people's revolution alongside of them. So even if there's a small military action that is the violence in it, it is largely the nonviolent people's revolution that does actually change cultural or does create cultural change. And so it only takes a very small percentage of the population, and that goes all the way back to our own American Revolution. It was about 3% of colonists across the 13 original colonies that agreed with the gentried landowners and one percenters who founded who signed our Constitution, that they should do it. So like it is interesting, and a part of that is because when at some point the police force, the military force, is going to be asked to fire on its own civilians and its own
Yeah.
citizens. And it increases the likelihood of a recognizable face being in the crowd. We read about this from the South Korea failed coup, where I mean, both they have a generational memory of having experienced a military coup, and so like
Yeah.
a lot of those soldiers were already like, we're not doing this. But there were reports that they were like, they saw their mailman, they saw their grocer, they saw their neighbor, and they were like, I'm not, no, like those are my people, and that can extend to departed guard members. So if you are a guard member, remember to go back and be there and be present and show your face so that your fellow service members who are still inside see your face, because that it is that recognition. You don't have to be inside of your uniform to be recognizable and to be a good influence on your peers.
So I want to hear more about what's going on in DC and what you are expecting to see there and what your plans are, Vince. But first, we're going to kick to our helpers highlight, which normally Vince takes. But since we have him here on the show, I'm going to go ahead and highlight a helper this week. This helper comes out of Orlando, Florida. His name is Blake Simons, and he is an attorney who is doing pro bono work. The intention here is to help protect anybody who is getting criminal mischief charges for being anywhere near the crosswalk of the Pulse nightclub where the horrific shooting happened in Orlando. The So if you're not following this, just a quick precursor. Ron DeSantis has made it illegal for there to be rainbow colors in crosswalks, and in an act of extreme petty fascism, decided to paint over every rainbow crosswalk, including the one that was painted in front of the Pulse nightclub to commemorate the victims of that shooting. Painted them all black. Perfect color for fascists to change a rainbow to. And so now, because people have been going out and repainting those sidewalks, or have been using sidewalk chalk to add the color over the black, he has now made it a criminal mischief charge to do any of that related to any sidewalks, particularly the one in front of the Pulse nightclub, which is particularly egregious. So this attorney is helping people. If you are in Orlando, or if you have people who are in Orlando, and they are working to bring the color back, to bring the memory back of the people who were murdered at the Pulse nightclub, and they get a criminal mischief charge, check out Blake Simons. We're going to put his Instagram handle in the show notes, but it is Blake Simons Esquire, ESQ, which is his Instagram handle. So go check him out, share his story so that anybody in Orlando knows that they've got some pro bono legal work coming to them from a great helper trying to do a great thing.
It's definitely really rad. And I like that he mentioned inside of that post to not resist arrest, because that just complicates and adds to the charges, especially for the petty misdemeanor, the charge that they're going to end up using. And as people get into the protest movement, terms like risking arrest, accepting arrest, things like that are things that we should start working into our vernacular, because if you are putting yourself into a situation where you recognize that an arrest is not just possible but probable, understanding that making a big show out of being detained and not just like quiet, like there are advantages to making that show, and then for your own personal liberty there can also be lots of disadvantages, and so make an informed and educated decision about how you're going to be arrested if you're going to risk arrest is always a good idea. And we talked about it with Aaron last week, and Brad and I are trying to figure out, and like I'd love to, we should all do an offline on like for other content sometime, making an arrest plan together for our
Yeah.
Instagram and our TikTok audience, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's a great point, Vince. If you are going to engage in an act like recoloring sidewalks in front of Pulse, know that you're doing something intentionally breaking a current law, whether that law is just or not. And if you're going to be arrested for that, know that's the purpose, right? Like, because there's a greater project at play here. And and having an arrest plan is super important. It's a very important part of it. Before I went to the protest yesterday, even, which I did not expect to get spicy at all, I still wrote the name of an attorney on our whiteboard just in case I don't come home and Steph knows who to call. So I had a an inkling of an arrest plan, not even close to where it needs to be, but we're going to actually produce one. We're going to share it with you guys so that you can create your own arrest plans, and we're even going to put a an arrest plan sort of template for you in our zine when we release that here shortly. So going to take these helpers and amplify what they're doing, and take the lessons they're trying to teach and make sure that you can learn them as well as ourselves along the way. So rad, Blake Simons, you're doing the work, man. Thank you for doing that.
I want to add to that. There's another thing that I'm noting for social media purposes, that part of your arrest plan, if you are planning on getting arrested because of what you're doing, which I love that you say there's a larger project at hand. And so with the larger project, be prepared. And I've been very impressed with the Palestinian movement in the UK. They've done a very good
Yes.
job of, during the arrests, being prepared with a well thought out speech that is spoken deliberately, with compassion, kindly, and factually, and not making a mess of the arrest and forcing the authorities to have to rough you or speed things along. If you have a speech, and it's interesting watching the police giving them the space to almost to say the speech, so that might be part of the preparation too, is know what you're going to say when you do get arrested, because you don't know whose camera is rolling on that arrest, and that is good
Yeah.
for messaging. So there's something there.
I've seen some great footage out of the UK of,
Hmm.
so also, if you're not following this, the United Kingdom has made it illegal to support a particular pro-Palestinian group. The
And
UK
they've been made
said
a
that's a
terrorist
terrorist
organization.
group.
Yeah.
That's right. And so if you even support that group, if you even put that group's name on a protest sign,
Hmm.
you will be arrested for supporting a terrorist organization. That's what the UK is doing. So people who think that you're going to like flee the US and go to a European country and like evade fascism, wake up please, and
Hmm.
know that this is, still happening there too. But the point is, to Christian's point, the video of these protesters getting arrested is so compelling
Hmm.
because some of them are hospital workers, doctors, some of them are just regular people who choose to let their body go fully limp, and the police have to like physically pull them up off the ground while they sit very peacefully. And maybe this is part of the protocol in the UK, but they seem to say, do you have a message? And in that moment, they're giving these incredibly articulate, very calm, very peaceful messages about the genocide. And the police look silly rounding
Yeah.
them up and
Yeah.
arresting them. And that's the point, is for them to look silly. Like that video can't be widely shared and say, look at the terrorists. They're supporting terrorists and look how angry and violent they're acting when they're fighting the police. So clearly our point is correct that they're terrorists,
Hmm.
Don't give them that
Exactly.
point. It's
Yep.
amazing.
Yep.
So let's get back to Vince. I want to talk about what's going on in DC. The National Guard has been deployed in DC under the false claim that DC crime is out of control, despite historically low crime rates. And there's been action happening in the DC protest scene. People protesting the Guard. I think pretty much every single day that they've been there. Vince, you're about to leave, I think today, to head that way. So you will still be there within their 30-day deployment window of their, at least their initial contract. Whether or not that gets extended or not, I guess we'll see. What do you expect? Do you have like already some preconceived like ideas of what it's going to be like? Do you already know what you're about to get into, or is it going to be a fresh journey for you?
I'm trying not to go into it with any like this is what's going to happen because I honestly don't know what's going to happen. The group I'm going with is a dedicated group of Midwesterners who want to meet with their members of Congress and have meetings scheduled on the Hill for the end of the week. And then they also like they're as curious as we are, like everybody else. They want to see what the Guard is up to, what they're doing. They've coordinated with some local organizations to do some protests and some counter like work with the Guard. They want to help them find ways out of this service if they don't feel that this is the best opportunity for them to serve their country, is the plan from some of them. And so I'm just going as a witness and to see, like I don't have anything planned other than just being there, and then
Yeah.
making sure that everything that I see gets shared.
Yeah. It's so cool that a group of people from Kansas are mobilizing to do this. I mean, I talk about this all the time because I just am constantly amazed by this. But like from what you're finding in these American crossroads, you're finding these pockets of fierce left resistance in these, otherwise red states, places that you just won't expect to see that because it's not part of the narrative, which is a shitty narrative, I think, because I don't think these people should be erased, right? Like the fact that they are moving out to DC to take this on, like that's the level of commitment I think everybody should be thinking about right now, right? Like, they're not trying to stay home and comfy and convenient. They're trying to get up in it, and while they're doing it, also realizing there's still a system at play that is potentially able to stop what is happening, and so they're doing double duty, meeting with representatives, something that I think a lot of people on the left tend to dismiss. Or maybe that's just an assumption. Maybe that's the very, very far left. But there's a certain contingency on the left wing of people who are like, I don't vote. Voting doesn't matter. The system is always fucked. Like, burn it all down. Right. So to see a group mobilize out there with the intention to still protest, still be active, but also still meet with their members of Congress shows you that there's still a more holistic strategy at play here that probably people should be considering.
Yeah, I mean it's going to take more than one approach for sure, no matter what. And I don't know if it's a there's a general malaise around the efficacy of voting these days for sure. I don't I mean there are certainly people who I self-identify as far left or will use the word like revolutionary communist even and say don't vote. But for every one of those that I talked to, I knew four or five people who whether they're Marxists or Trotskyists or wherever their identity is outside of the left, who will say that's absolute balderdash. Like that's not part of the political ideology because political ideologies require engagement in politics. And so a
Mm,
lot of so like I tend to not accept that like so much of the left doesn't want you to vote. Like there is a particular very small like
yeah,
overrepresented, like people like to talk about them because we like to find problems with ourselves, but I don't. I like the
yeah,
majority
that's
of
fair.
people who are organizing, even if it's center right liberals all the way over to left socialists and communists. They want to see you engage in the system until they can change the system. It's the same way that we tend not to fault people for purchasing at a grocery store and not growing all of their own foods because we do live inside of a system. And so it is really great to see that and to be able to know that not only that like these pockets of very like I don't want to use the word militant because that can scare some people and they're not necessarily militant, but like very dedicated activists and organizers who have spent their entire lives outnumbered. They really are the most they're the most fearless groups that I've ever seen, and I've done
Mm,
New York and Portland and Denver and Pittsburgh and all of these like like high key blue places where everybody's always so brave, and it's like yeah, but it's because the majority are on your side. Like, would you say that in Nebraska? Would you say that with your chest in Kansas? And would you
that's
say
right.
that 10 toes forward in Missouri? And I mean, it does not shock me at all that those human beings who do and will again are the ones who I see leading the revolution right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so fair. I mean, so much of who we are is made up of the people that we hang out with the most. And when you are in an area that is primarily one political way of thinking, it's the easy thing to do just to go along with it in order to stay in the in group, which is ultimately what human beings want to do, is that we want to be on the in group. It makes us feel more secure. It's just based into it's based into our genetics. So it's true. These are some of the bravest people to put everything on the line and basically banish yourself from your community because you're not agreeing with the status quo. That is cojones. That's real balls to do that because we so much want to belong as humans. And I think it's where a lot of the MAGA movement is born out of is just a sense of belonging, people wanting to belong in a place where there's strong message and speaks to their emotions, right? Well, for those folks in those places, in those red states, and there's still that bright light, oh my God, massive respect, because I think we all feel that pressure. It takes a lot of heart to say, you know what, whatever you guys think is reality, maybe that's not true. It takes a lot of bravery to do that, to you know, yep, to
Yeah.
go against the grain and say, you know what, we make the world, we could make just as easily make it differently. When, that's one of the truths of life is that we make this world. It's just as easy to make it differently. Why aren't we doing it? And so yeah, so hats off that you're talking to these folks as you're going around the country. Anyway, that's my little speech.
It was a good
Yeah,
speech. I enjoyed it.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, it goes back to our last conversation with Aaron, right? Like this bravery should be contagious,
yeah,
and seeing the acts of bravery coming from places you don't expect makes it all that much more contagious. I'm like,
yeah,
oh shit. I mean, they could be fighting like that fiercely from Kansas.
yeah,
Why am I not fighting more fiercely from here? The
yeah.
closest thing I've ever gotten to that level of bravery was like, when I was 16, I had a punk rock band called Fuck You Very Much, and we played in a redneck pool hall, a bunch of anti-racist songs. That's about as close as I've gotten to, standing against the status quo. So yeah, seeing them doing it out of these Midwest states that is the kind of contagious bravery that I think is really fueling me a lot lately. Um, Christian, we were talking earlier about, you were asking like how do you find your people in a particular protest action,
Hmm.
whether it's finding whether you're going out of town to a place like DC and you have to find your people in foreign lands, or whether you're going to a protest in your own city. How did you characterize it? You used a really good analogy for it.
First day of school for me. It's sort of like in terms of is that what you're talking about? I think
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
it's this idea that I just dropped my daughter off at first day of school up here in Toronto this
Fresh
morning.
on your
And she
mind.
was all tears because we just moved from the States. It's a whole new world and all that. And I just talked to her about the fact that, we're all nervous. My dad was an educator for 35 years, and what he told me was like, Christian, as a teacher, I'm always nervous first day of school every year because I don't know who I'm going to be with in that group. I don't know what types of weirdos might be in that group and what kinds of people, who's the in group, who's the out group. I need to figure all that stuff out as well. And that's what I told my daughter. I was like, you'll always feel nervous going on in, but you just got to like push through the uncomfortable and get there. But how do you find your people? And we never think we're going to find our people when we go to school. We're never going to find our footing, but you figure it out. So, the one thing that the anxiety that I've always had with protests is just, yeah, where do you find the people outside of it beforehand? How do you find your community once you're there? Do you find a community? I mean, what's been your experience?
I think the first day of school analogy is really solid, because you do see like the organizers and they're like the people that they're connected to in the community. So you're like, oh, those people in the community are always here, always active. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe if you are also active, you're probably already plugged in. There's there's like the cool kids, right? In the school analogy, and those are probably the anarchists, right? The ones in full block, they've got gear strapped to them and shit. You're like, okay, if some shit goes down, I'm gonna be looking for you guys. But they might be a little too spicy for others, right? I certainly saw dissent in the Denver protest yesterday between the anarchists and some of the more moderate, I guess, from that range. And then there's right now there's this real contingency of a lot of older protesters, particularly boomers, showing up. A lot of them have the time, right? So like if that's your group, like they're pretty easy to find. They're usually showing protest signs to each other or on the sides of the streets before something shows up, so you can kind of like see where they're at, connect with them. Um, And then, one of the other things I mentioned earlier today is that there's these like booths set up at a lot of the protests I see. I don't know if this is everywhere, but if you go to a protest or a given action and you see people set up with booths trying to say get people to join their organization or to donate or do whatever, those are people willing and waiting to talk to people. And you may find people in those conversations that just help warm up your social need to communicate with strangers, which makes it a little easier to do it once you're actually like in the mass. I don't always communicate with a lot of people around me at protests, but I find opportunities. If I'm there by myself in particular, some people should consider always going with a friend or going with somebody who knows you're there. Um, a lot of times I'll find myself just in moments of conversation with people. If I'm blocking intersections, one of the other people blocking intersections with me we'll end up in a conversation together. Or if we're in the middle of a protest march, like the chants are an opportunity to commune with each other, in the moments between the chants, just shout something, and you'll find people who are like, fuck yeah. And you know what I mean? You can just make camaraderie happen and start to figure out where you're most comfortable, who are the people with the right chants, who are the people with the right clothes, if you're turned off by the black bloc thing, right? Like there are ways. Do you see, Vince, when you're like attending any of the protests that you are reporting from the Heartland, do they also have a lot of these like booths set up and, make it pretty easy for people to find who their people are? Or, what's it like there?
I mean, it's yeah, the booths thing started as I saw it. Like started popping up around the No Kings protest, 5051, started
Yeah.
asking everybody to reach out to all of the other organizations. And it was something that rippled from their national organizers down to their most local. And so that is something that I've definitely been seeing. And I've seen it mirrored at not 5051 events too. Like it like 5051 is made up of in general organizers from many different organizations, and so what is and what is not supported by their organization is sometimes hard to determine, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. Because they popped up out of nowhere on purpose from people who existed already on purpose. And so like just because that person is at another event, does that make it 5051? So like, there's lots of questions about what is and what isn't, but that's the beauty of an autonomous movement. But it has ripped like here in Colorado. We saw that at the Aurora GEO ICE Detention Facility Center. They do that every week. They have a town hall. They have a little like makers market and like that flea market of like I think of it as like that first week of college where all of the clubs are signed
Yeah.
up are out on the quad and like come sign up for this one. Like it feels very much like that,
Mhm.
like a club fair. Um, I see it. Yeah, it definitely
On
happens
point.
across the Heartland as well, and it happened in Greeley yesterday as well. All of the organizers, like, it's twofold. Is one, there's been a lot of complaints from people about like, okay, so we came out, we protested, what changed? And it's like, well, what did you do with your rage after this moment? And then people had the easy option of saying, well, I didn't know how to get involved. So it's like, all right, here, motherfuckers, like these are all your options for getting involved. Like we some of you will have a new excuse tomorrow, but also some of you will be involved tomorrow. So like this is a great one.
Yeah.
And then ostensibly it also makes it harder to conduct violent police actions against a career fair. I'm not saying that it's impossible and it'll never happen. Like we have the violent visual by Aurora Police Department.
That will be the red line.
But like yeah, like it keeps the action safe, and then it also helps to activate the people that are there. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's also not new. Like they did it like they've done this in the movements through the 60s through the 70s through every wave of the civil rights movement in American history. But yeah, No Kings is when I saw that really pop in, and I love it, especially as a person who
Yeah.
does go to protests to talk to people. It's like, what? An entire line of people who want to talk to me? Let's do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. I think that aside from like when you're on the ground, like when you're actually at the protest itself, how you engage, there are so many ways you can socially engage. They're not that different from how you socially engage in life. So if you're like really, really having a hard time with in person talking to strangers, this stuff also starts online before the protest. So in Denver, we have a subreddit called Denver Protests. Just posted it to it today, in fact, one of Vince's stories. And that I've seen in that subreddit people saying, I'm going to the Labor Day protests. Anyone else going? I'd like to have a protest buddy. I've seen people buddy up via Reddit channels, right? Or Discord servers. So, use the internet tools available to you if talking to people in the moment, if finding your people in the moment is just like a little too much, and trust me, I get it. Then you can do this ahead of time. You can find people ahead of time, and then you can have even just one person that gives you someone to talk to process what you're seeing, what you're experiencing, to kind of discuss what you think. Just like have someone to vocalize with is useful. I mean, I have sometimes, there have been some protests where I stayed completely to myself and I chanted a little bit, but I almost was completely even silent. I was just a body in a mass of bodies. Like, those are some of my first protests. And as I've gotten more used to them and understood the thing, like now when I show up to a protest march, I often like to be helpful. And so I'll go ask the organizers if there's anything I can do to help. I can block intersections. I was doing that in the Bay a lot during the 2020 uprising. So if you guys need that help, I'm happy to block intersections for you or keep an eye out on, feds that may be trying to set up operations or whatever. I haven't seen as much of that happening, although I did see a Fed recording everyone's faces via both body cam and a mobile phone yesterday at the protests in Denver, ostensibly collecting facial recognition content to build a list of people who are actively protesting. That was pretty creepy. But luckily, like, people suppress that person, right? Like, there's so you can help in so many ways, and if you are apt to help, you can just go to the protest organizers and say, how may I be useful? They may say, we've got it covered, and then you just do what you want. I mean, the protest organizers yesterday told me they got it covered, and you know what, I still blocked intersections for them and they still were appreciative. They thought they had it covered, but I saw weaknesses. I saw openings. I saw places where the cops were abandoning their duty that they had prearranged with. I've got thoughts about that, but the point was there were vulnerabilities that weren't covered, and I still was able to be helpful, and they were still appreciative and came up and said something to me about it. So all of those are ways to do it, but online is a great place to start.
And then when you transfer to in person too, like it can feel really intimidating. It can feel really big, but like it's just like any I love the first day of school analogy for it because it really is. It's just a living organism made up of so many different things, and I really appreciate that you identified the place that you feel like you belong the most, Brad. Like, don't be in a rush when you get to these things too. Like, plan on attending more than one because most things that you're learning how to do take more than one attempt. And the first time you go, be silent, stay silent, like take it all in, be an observer more than a participant, because that'll let you help to identify the people that make you feel safe, the activities that you can contribute to and feel like you participated. And then the next time you go down, go to either those people or those activities and look around and recognize the people who were there a little bit. And then the third time, make eye contact and smile and start talking. Like, it's going to take a little bit of time. Nobody's ever dropped into a sea of people and been like, I belong here immediately. I mean, like, I've certainly had those moments late at night on substances, but like, inside of the actual world, like I don't think that anybody's ever 100% comfortable with a new experience all at once, surrounded by new people in a high anxiety, high tense situation. And so, like even the leaders and the people that you're looking to at the microphone, they were in your position probably only a couple of weeks, months, years before, and had to learn how to navigate it all. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
scary, but my 8-year-old likes to say, big breath, full send when it's scary.
Yeah, it's a also we're wired to be around other people as much as you may. We've been convinced that, we should just be on our screens and we're connect with people. The one thing that I've found when I've gone to protests is that I have objectively felt better afterwards
Mm.
about human beings in general. When I'm just on the news and I'm on the iPhone, of course, you know what all that is. It's enragement for engagement, and so that
Yeah.
can really send you into a depressive spin and a sense of powerlessness. But I've always just felt better. There was a calmness in my body afterwards, and maybe that's just the medicine. And like you said, you don't need to say anything. I've gone to so many protests where I've not spoken to anyone, have just walked silently. I have not even chanted. I usually bring a funny sign. Funny is always good. Funny is money, as they say. Bring a funny sign that'll get you some connections, or at least people giving you a nodding glance. But maybe just for your mental health, get on out there on the street and instead of asking the question, well, did it matter? Well, maybe look inwards. Maybe it mattered for you. So that
Yeah.
is maybe what just go and protest for yourself, if anything, for your own health.
I like the idea of just you have to build the habit, right?
Mm.
Like the first time you put your feet on a major thoroughfare, it's a magical feeling to me, at least.
Hmm.
It's a place you're not supposed to be walking, and when you do it, you recognize that you should actually, because they're your streets. They're like my favorite chant has always been "Whose streets? Our streets."
Hmm.
Because it is our reclamation of our own power as people within our city. It's saying that we belong here, whether you like us here or not. These are our streets. And just having your feet on that pavement. I mean, I like to bring a skateboard to the protest because not only do I use it to get ahead of the march and help start to protect blocks ahead of time. But there's also this like I get to skate down the middle of Colfax or down the middle of Lincoln or down the middle of Broadway in Denver. And I'm not supposed to be skating down that major thoroughfare. It's really cool feeling. You know what I mean? So just that liberty, that
Mm.
freedom, that reclamation of power, I think is a powerful habit builder because it almost becomes the medicine, right? Like you said, I was going to say it's almost like a drug. Like you get this euphoria from it, and you also get exhausted from it in the best ways. I came home yesterday with zero spoons left. I had no energy. I could barely function, but I wasn't like bad. You know what I mean? I was like really feeling solid and peaceful and calm, not afraid of what everything was going on, not afraid. I wasn't like doom scrolling the news. I was able to just like rest on the couch and say, okay, now is the time for restoration. I just felt the euphoria of claiming our power and some of the excitement of the anxiety from a little spiciness that might have taken place that I got involved in, which was a little fun. That was just my flavor. Might not be your flavor. I love spicy foods, but but yeah, that medicine, right?
Hmm.
I also smoked a joint afterwards, added a little bit of extra recovery medicine to it, which is always a good way to process. Vince and I have built this habit of anytime that we protest together, like trying to find a way to smoke a blunt afterwards and walk home and just kind of woosah. We don't even really need to talk about what just happened because it often doesn't matter.
Well, I think there's some decompression that's definitely needed. I love that you talk about that satisfying but exhausted feeling, and it's sort of like the end of a hard day's work, like satisfying hard day's work where you accomplished something small, but it was more just it's a body satisfaction, and you need to sleep. And I think that happens at a protest too because there's a lot going on. You're not
Yeah.
only just in a situation which may or may not pop off in any way or form. You're around new people. New people is all new stimulation. You're there for bigger reasons than normally you get up in the morning for, which is its own kind of weight and gravity. I think the decompression and being able to maybe those are the people that you're going to want to meet with afterwards, are the people who have also experienced it with you, just to sort
Mm,
of like, whew, okay, so that happened.
yeah.
What do we learn?
Speaking of chasing that good, and also needing some decompression, I'm really happy that I was able to join you guys for a little bit on the show this week. Thank you so much for having me on. I like to say that I'm not just a producer, I'm a biggest fan. It is a privilege to be able to hang out on mic with you all for a little bit. Like I said, I am in Chicago, Missouri, and Kansas. This week, headed into DC next week. Everybody can follow my adventures at Vinny Chant everywhere. It will always be written about in these American Crossroads and Yellow Scene. And I'd love to be able to slide in and make an appearance on this here show each week. I can't
Yes.
wait again next week, but I'm gonna let you guys take it from here and uh, and get out there on them streets.
Yes,
Good luck.
yes, Vince. Have a safe trip to DC. We are really excited to hear the stories that you're going to be gathering and seeing the footage and the photos, and can't wait to debrief after you get back. Oh, well, not just DC, also Chicago. Yeah, good luck in Chicago as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't wait. And I'll be producing the show next week from DC, so maybe there'll be an update from where I'm at. So that'll be fun to see you
Ooh,
guys.
Let's
exciting
definitely do that.
exciting
Yes.
potential sprinkle out there for the next one.
You're
Right on.
Vincent, our foreign correspondent on the ground in DC.
Our domestic foreign correspondent.
Depends on which host is introducing me, right?
Oh, yeah. Good point.
True.
That is a great point. Cool. All right, Vince. Well, we'll
All right.
catch you next week.
To end this off, my high low of the week was actually today, dropping my daughter off at school. Like maybe some of you know, or maybe you don't. 5 weeks ago, I moved up to Canada, moved my family up to Canada. I'm originally from here. 30 years ago, I left. I lived over in Europe, and then moved to the United States in 1995 and worked there and lived there and married my wife there, and her name is America. I married America, and we had a daughter, and we hit a red line in which we looked to one another and said, "It's time to move." So that's the brief catch up. So 5 weeks ago, I dropped my daughter off at school here in Toronto, and my high is that my wife and I are not worried what might happen to our daughter because the number
Mm,
one killer of children in the United States right now is gun violence. That is something that I didn't have to think about this morning. And I looked around at all the parents and I thought just how bloody lucky they are. And I hope that they appreciate here in Canada just how lucky that feels because there's
yeah.
also, it's my low, my sadness for you, Brad.
Yeah.
You, for all my friends out there who are parents who have the most terrifying thing that they have to think about every day, which will probably pop up in their head for even a millisecond, but it's there and present, is the idea that when they drop their children off, they may never see them again.
Yeah.
And so that was my high low, and it's sort of I just from up here, I'd like to say that for all the listeners down stateside, I was there for 30 years. I love America. I married America, like I said, and
And flitted her off to Canada.
and flitted her off to Canada. But there is another way. Just like I said, that the truth of life is that we make the world we live in, and we can just as easily make it differently. And Canada is a reminder of that. It's touching grass coming up here, and for all the parents down there, we just have to think about it differently. And
Yeah.
we will hopefully get there because I just life should not be that hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
I struggle with this a lot. Like my son is in preschool. He'll be in kindergarten for the next school year. And currently, the preschool we have him in is a private preschool. We spend more than most people spend on rent to have him in this space, and we may keep doing that. And I'm not a private school person. I went to public school. I really wrestle with this because I want him to experience the diversity of public school and the hardships of public school. I know he will excel academically, so I'm not really worried about that. But I don't want to put him into a school that has a extremely higher likelihood of experiencing a shooting. And that
Mm.
fear of him having to experience that, of me having to experience that, or my wife having to experience that as parents is horrifying. It's just like
Yeah.
literally the most crippling thought I can imagine as a parent. And we don't know what we're gonna do. We're sort of playing it by ear almost every single minute because it feels so heavy, and we're not really sure what the right move is. But we're thinking about keeping him in private school just because it feels like the money is worth the protection and safety. You know, I mean, the
Yeah.
fact that gun violence is the number one killer of children in the United States, and that hasn't moved us yet
Yeah.
to do anything about this
Yeah.
is mind blowing. They
Mind
had
blowing.
one mass shooting in Australia, and the government bought back all the guns.
Hmm.
what the fuck is going on here? I don't know.
Yeah.
I could say that is my low, but I'm actually going to stick with a high. And that is that, I got to go out to that protest yesterday. My brother and sister-in-law were there who just escaped Texas to move to Colorado, and being with family in that environment, feet on pavement, feeling the energy, whatever the criticisms may be, I think the worst protest is still a great protest because people see people doing it. And seeing people do it is really the whole thing, right? Getting that bravery to be contagious. That's just an infectious feeling that I love to experience. And, it gave me my boost of great dopamine and serotonin or whatever else it provides. Maybe there's some oxytocin in there as well. Great chemical combination. And it feels like when you're snuggling a loved one, like that just body rush, that's the same physical, somatic feeling of being in that protest. Like a lot of stimulation, a lot of rage, a lot of fear, but so much support and, safety among numbers and volume coming from the people and so many different people. It's just such a wild, crazy group of people of all different types, doing all different types for showing up for all different types of reasons.
Yeah.
That's great. Like maybe it didn't have a coordinated message. Okay. It got enough of a message out there that it brought all these people, even the weirdos, even the spicy ones, even the socially awkward ones, even the moderates, the ones who want to shill for the Dems. They were all there together, all doing it together, which is what we got to do. I think if we learned anything from the history of fascism, it's that we have to coalesce. And only through doing that are we actually going to fight what we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. The one nice thing about being on the left or not on the right when it comes to protests is you can be sure that there aren't going to be any Nazi flags or Confederate flags at the protest. So
that's right. Unless there are counter protesters, in which case, it gives you someone to yell at.
There you go.
If you're so inclined. So listen, folks, if you're out there, there's a few things you should take away. Here's how you can help. Get online, find your protest actions happening in your city, coordinate with people ahead of time so that it's easier for you when you show up. And then show up. And if you need to be quiet, be quiet. If you need to just silently march, silently march. If you need to yell, if you need to be active, if you need to help, you have all these different avenues to do it. Feel free, feel supported in being able to talk to strangers and connecting with them. Go to booths if they're there. It's a really easy starting point, if not to meet people, to warm yourself up socially to being a part of that protest. And don't be afraid, because more than likely, the protest is going to be just a show of force, a unity of voice, but it's not going to be rubber bullets and tear gas and riot police and anarchists throwing Molotov cocktails. I've never seen that really in all of the protests I've gone to, and I've been to a few. So find out what's going on online, connect with people, find a protest buddy, get to that protest for the first time, for the second time, for the third time. When you've gotten used to it and you're ready to risk arrest, get an arrest plan in place. And we'll be helping guide you along the way as we start to build our own. Yes.
Awesome, dude. That was awesome. Great.
Yeah. Fuck yeah. All right, everybody. Well, that's it for this week. From Find the Helpers, I am Brad Bogus.
And I'm Christian Campbell.
And we'll see you next week.
Find the Helpers Pod is a production for Yellow Scene Magazine. Our executive producer is Vince Chandler. Our hosts are Christian Campbell and Brad Bogus. And our music is by Mark Wilson X. Don't forget to share this episode.